Welcome to Constitution Week, where we are culminating today with our final day. We've got a special guest for you all. Just a reminder that these events are brought to you by Maricopa Community College's Center for Excellence in Inclusive Democracy, as well as the fabulous civic engagement staff at our colleges. Special shout out to our staff and MCLI for all the technical support. We really could not host these sessions without them. A reminder that all of our events are nonpartisan. We don't affiliate with any particular political party or organization. Our goal is simply to provide you with factual information so that you can make well-informed decisions as you vote, and also to be active, engaged members of your community. That's another goal of us here at Maricopa Community Colleges. In addition to the great education we provide so that you can go on and find a career or transfer to a university, one of our primary goals is also to ensure that you have a well-rounded skill set to be active and engaged in your community, making a positive impact. Our Constitution Week so far has been loaded with great information. We've had a number of guests talking about the 10 ballot propositions, what other things you will see on your ballot, how to be engaged community members, as well as Maricopa's own legislative agenda and how we interact with elected officials as a public entity. But we have a special guest for you today, Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer. He is the 30th recorder of Maricopa County and was elected in November 2020. Prior to his election, he worked as a lawyer and a business person. He holds a bachelor's degree from Tulane University, a master's degree from the University of Chicago, and a JD from the University of Chicago Law School. So a big round of applause for our own county recorder joining us today. Thank you so much, Mr. Richer. Really appreciate you sharing your time and insights with our students. As we begin, obviously our celebration focuses on Constitution Day. So what comments do you have regarding this important document, probably the most important document in our government?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it. I was with you all last year for Constitution Week, and it was a real pleasure. I got to meet students at Phoenix College, and then I got to chat with the community college-wide district through a web program like this. And one of the things that I enjoyed is it was a relatively manageable group, and I think we have that again this year. And so I look forward to turning this into a dialogue. I look forward to hearing your questions, any thoughts, concerns, issues, things you want to know about with respect to elections, with respect to participating in the process. So I'm grateful to be back here. I've just printed this off to let you all know that I am actually part of the family. I live in South Phoenix. I live right by South Mountain Community College, and it's a beautiful school. I've been meaning to get really back into my Spanish lessons. So far, that's been more aspirational than actual in practice, but maybe you'll hold me to it, and such that when I come back next year, hopefully you can ask me more questions in Spanish than this year, in which case I'd ask you to go pretty slowly, maybe at like a second grade level. So
I'll be sure to include that in the program next year.
Yeah, a little Spanish quiz for me at the beginning. Last year I spoke about the strange relationship increasingly between my office and the First Amendment. This year, I'd like to again give you an overview of what my office does, but then talk about the constitutional framework a little more broadly, because I think it's so special, and it's special to me, and it's pretty unique in the course of human history, and really set humanity on a different road than we'd been on prior to that. So again, my name's Stephen Richer. I'm the Maricopa County Recorder. As mentioned, I was elected in November 2020, took office in January 2021. My office has three main statutory roles. All of them are fantastic, but we're talking more about two of them today. But the first is the recording of public documents. So we are the official record keeper for anything that you want to enter into the public record in all of Maricopa County. We record more than 1 million documents every year. A lot of it has to do with real estate. And the reason why you want to do that is such that you can designate, you can demarcate that you own a piece of property, that you own your home. It will be in the public record at, you guessed it, the recorder's office. So if you buy a home or if you refinance over the next 2.5 years, you're going to have a stamp on your property paper that's going to have my name on it. And so that's a very important function of the office. The second statutory responsibility is voter registration. We are responsible for registering voters, and we are responsible for making changes to the voter registration database, and we are responsible for making sure that the voter registration database remains active, remains live, remains healthy, such that, of course, you can ultimately participate in our election process. We have 2.5 million registered voters in Maricopa County. We're a very interesting county politically because we're roughly divided a third, a third, a third. We have the most number of actually independents, nonpartisan identifying people, more than any Republicans, more than Democrats, and that's a pretty recent phenomenon, and it makes Maricopa County even more interesting. Then we have Republicans at roughly a third, and then a little bit behind that are Democrats at roughly a third. And so when you hear Maricopa County being discussed in the news, it's because it's such a large county. It's the second largest voting jurisdiction in the United States, behind only Los Angeles County, and because it's such a politically interesting county with that third breakdown. And then the third component is the administration of elections. And of course, that's really where the rubber hits the roads. And that's where some of these constitutional rights come into play that I'm going to give a brief overview. We are an office of about 150, 160 employees between the recorder's office and the elections department, full-time employees, that is. But we swell just like an anaconda that swallows I don't know, a mouse or something like that, but in a slightly less frightful way during the election season. And we would love to have you participate in being a temporary employee for the election cycle if that's something that you're interested in. We actually grow to about 3,000 temporary workers. So we're all hands on deck. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians, making this election happen, making sure that our very large voting jurisdiction has access to a transparent and safe and secure election system. So we're talking about the federal Constitution, and that's, of course, why we're here this week, and that's why you've had a couple of great programs. I heard some of your other speakers, and they're great speakers, and so hopefully you were able to tune into some of those and enjoy those. And of course, this is to commemorate the signing of our country's Constitution in 1787. And whether you're a student of the Constitution or if you're just wondering why our nation celebrates such a day, or if you just thought that maybe this would be interesting and you had a few free minutes, I hope I can leave you with just a few tidbits of information that will make you make you think a little bit about our Constitution. So we're, of course, talking about the federal Constitution, and that's important because Arizona has a state constitution that also protects certain rights and delegates certain authorities. But it's not Arizona's birthday. That's in February, so we'll talk about the federal Constitution today. Lots of countries have constitutions, and some are written, some are unwritten, some are long, some are short. Some of these governments are democracies and some are not. In fact, some of the most brutal governments in the world have adopted a constitution, and they even claim to abide by it, and they sometimes use it as a veneer for some of the terrible things that they do. So the truth is that the Constitution there's nothing inherently magical about writing down thoughts on a piece of paper. So what makes ours special? And why do we have such a reverence for the United States Constitution when other countries seem to occasionally treat them like shoes that should be disposed of after you've walked around them a little while? I lived in Latin America for some time, and many countries in Latin America have systems in which the Constitution changes much more regularly than the Constitution that has been put in place since our country's earliest days. So to understand the importance of the Constitution, you have to go back further in time, and that's to the year 1215, so roughly 500 years before the formation of the United States. And that's when a document called the Magna Carta was drafted. And the Magna Carta was the first contract between a ruler and his subjects. So binding them together, thinking of them as an agreement. Prior to the Magna Carta, there was no agreement. Whoever ruled, and quite frankly, he wasn't subject to any agreements or really any limitations beyond what he himself imposed on himself. He was the ruler because he thought he was either divinely chosen, or more likely because he had an army, and quite frankly, you didn't. And if you didn't like the way he ruled, he'd kill you. It's pretty morbid and it's pretty sad. But then again, I think we sometimes glamorize past moments of history, but life was pretty morbid, short, and really hungry for much of the world prior to the creation of freedom enshrining constitutional governments. And it was the Magna Carta that began to change this framework. It said that a ruler enters into an agreement with his subject. He rules based off of this agreement, not based off of whim. The king has powers granted by this document, and so do the subjects. And so the United States Constitution took this idea from the Magna Carta that it's an agreement, it's a contract between the governed and the government, but it expanded it. And specifically, the United States Constitution focused on the idea of rights. So prior to the liberal enlightenment that gave rise to the Constitution, European governments thought that rights came from the king. You can only farm on the land because the king allows it. You can only marry because the king allows it. You can only trade items because the king allows it. So the United States Constitution flipped this on its head. Instead of saying, I, the king, recognize certain following rights, or the government gives you these rights, rights belong to you simply because you were a human being, or because you were born. So why are you allowed to farm? Because you're a human. Why are you allowed to marry? Because you're a human. Why are you allowed to trade items? Because you're a human. Now, I should, of course, pause here and point out the biggest blemish in the United States history, and that's that while we envision these concepts as natural rights bestowed on all of us through our Creator, rights that were inherent to any human being, we, of course, limited, for much of our country's history, these rights to only certain humans. Other humans weren't automatically granted these rights, whether because of their race, gender, religion, or otherwise. So while our constitutional text was immediately the shining beacon of a rights-based government for all, it took us, of course, many, many years for us to get closer to achieving this in practice. But even those people who suffered this unforgivable failure, the United States Constitution was critically important because of the language it held broadly imbuing rights as a result of simply being born. And that's the model we've consistently tried to get closer to, we've consistently tried to strive for. And in this sense, really, the Constitution of the United States was radical because, as mentioned, this was simply not the way things worked prior to the United States Constitution. This Constitution gave all the chips to the governed rather than to the government. And the Constitution and its framework, and it's not that long, I encourage you to take a look if you haven't before, is designed to protect these rights. It implements a system of checks and balances. It demands a Supreme Court help guard the rights recognized in the Constitution. It gives us a Bill of Rights. And then, and only then, it lists specific limited amounts of power that the people are willing to give to the government. Now, only if the power is listed in the Constitution does it belong to the government instead of the people. Again, this is a reversal of the process from when a king would give his subjects power instead of the other way around. Now, there are some powers that are off limits in the relationship between the government and the people, some things that our Constitution bars from being surrendered by the people to the government. So think of the Bill of Rights when you're thinking of rights like that. But for those items that are up for negotiation, the areas where we choose to give the government power, where we narrow and widen the scope of the government's power, where we say what areas they can get into, what areas they can't get into, that's where elections come into play. And of course, as mentioned, elections is one of the responsibilities of my office. And so broadly speaking, and in its purest form, the purpose of elections is to determine what powers and areas of authority we, the people, want to give to government. And we largely do this indirectly through elected representatives But the end result is the same, and occasionally we do it directly, such as through the initiative process, which I know you had a previous speaker talk about the various initiatives that you can directly weigh in on. So do we want to give government the power to tax property? Do we want to give government the power to regulate certain health decisions? All of these are being negotiated through the election process and all in the framework set forth in our Constitution. And it's for that reason that my office, which, like I said, registers voters and administers elections, has a special connection to the United States Constitution and to the preservation of the rights set forth in the Constitution. And I consider myself greatly honored to play a small part of being a guardian of this framework, being a guardian of these rights, being a guardian of the negotiation process that happens in elections. And if that's something that excites you, then as I mentioned at the outset, we'd encourage you to ask questions and to even consider being part of the process in this upcoming election. So with that as the backdrop, I'd love to answer any questions you have about the election process, elections here in Maricopa County, my thoughts on the Constitution, how I got to this office, whether or not I think the Cardinals will be any good this year or anything else. Yeah, I can even try and answer them in Spanish if you really, really, really insist.
I'll save the Spanish quiz for next time.
All right, thank you.
We'll make sure to start off with that. Thank you so much for your opening remarks. And I love the way you frame the Constitution as a radical document. I think some people see it as an old document, but for its time, quite radical, and how elections is really the negotiation process. So appreciate that. A couple of questions that have come in. So how does your department, how does Maricopa County or any county interact with Secretary of State? What are the different layers in terms of our election process, and how do you interact with those other entities?
It's a great question. Now, counties are the administrators of elections. So there are 15 counties in Arizona. Maricopa County actually makes up about 62% of the voting population of Arizona. So we're by far the biggest county, but each county has its recorder's office and elections department. We are the ones that are on the ground administering the elections. The Secretary of State sits atop the 15 different county recorders and puts forward the playbook, takes state law, because elections are state creatures that are largely driven by state law, takes that state law, translates it into a manual that's a playbook for elections such that we know how to comply with state law and still be able to administer elections. The Secretary of State also does important functions such as testing and certifying election equipment prior to elections, coordinating between the different counties such that we can have a more uniform, seamless system for all Arizonans to participate in, and make sure that the election framework as a state is healthy. But in terms of sort of the nuts and bolts in the day-to-day and setting up the polling places, that is done at the county level. And that's true of largely of most of the United States, that elections are done on the municipal level. Now, in other states, there are many more counties. Western states have far fewer counties, and that's a little curious creature of American history. But so there are over 3,000 voting jurisdictions in the United States, even though we only have 15 here in Arizona.
So I think that's important to note, just the breadth and scope of what your department does, you and your team, in terms of administering elections. Over 3,000 voting jurisdictions in the country, and Maricopa County is the second largest.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And as mentioned before, we're also one of the ones that people like to pay the most attention to, just because Arizona is such a politically dynamic state and interesting state right now.
So you mentioned earlier the third, and how that is unusual for compared to many parts of the country. Does it pose particular challenges in terms of administering elections?
Not per se, but people. So for instance, in the tabulation process, and no, every single jurisdiction throughout the United States will continue tabulating until the very last ballot is counted. Now, the reality is that in many of these jurisdictions, people tune out after 75% of the results are in, because the members of the media can call it, and it's pretty obvious who's going to win. As a result of our dynamic state and of our closely divided, in terms of partisan affiliation, county, people watch until the very last drop. Here in Maricopa County, we had the fewest votes of any state in the United States separating President Joe Biden from former President Trump in the November 2020 election. President Biden won by about 10,500 votes. And when you think of 3.5 million ballots being cast in all of Arizona, that's minuscule. And so there will be a lot of people who will say, we'll be sort of breathing over your neck until the very bitter end. But that with it comes more opportunities for education, more people want to get involved. And so we try and focus on some of the good rather than some of the, all eyes are on us type situation.
All eyes on you. That's a good way of putting it. You are definitely tracked closely. In terms of getting involved, we've had a couple of questions. You mentioned becoming involved and how your team swells dramatically as we get closer to election day. So what are the different avenues? I think people recognize poll workers right away, but there's many other opportunities to become involved, correct?
That's right. And you can become involved from anything from starting tomorrow to just one day, just work elections day. You can work on anything from, yes, working at a voting location, and that's maybe the best known because it's interacting with the voters, but there's a lot of processes that go into making elections work, whether it's verifying signatures, whether it's working in our warehouse, whether it's driving box trucks, whether it's helping process ballots, whether it's being part of a bipartisan team that removes the ballot from the envelope, creating the secret ballot. Lots of stuff goes on. All these positions are paid. The pays ranges a little bit. For instance, we particularly are in need of some warehouse people, and so that's a higher hourly pay rate. But all of them are opportunities to get involved with the elections process. You can go to getinvolved.maricopa.vote. That's getinvolved.maricopa.vote, and it lists the different positions that are available, and it gives little descriptions of them. And you can either fill out your interest there, you can email me. We'd love to have you. It's exciting. It's exciting and it's exhausting. I won't lie to you. Election day in particular is a long day. Polls open at 6 a.m. They close at 7 p.m. But we're working through the night. But again, you're doing democracy, so to speak, and you're doing it in an exciting place, and you're doing it alongside other Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Libertarians who are excited about this process, and all of your friends will know that you're part of that when we're up on CNN or Fox News or whatever it is, and they're saying, trying to do the sort of the analysis of all the different counties in Arizona and figure out who's going to win.
That's a great plug. We've put the link in the chat several times. So any of you tuning in want to take advantage of those opportunities, make sure you visit that site. And there really is quite a range. So I know poll worker is the one that sort of pops to mind, but there really are quite a number of different avenues for involvement. Another question that we've had asked is whether your vote was counted website updated in real time. So you can kind of track where you are in the process, correct? And how quickly does that happen?
That's right. And I strongly encourage you to do that. You can sign up for text message alerts if you're an early voter, or you can go to our special dashboard where you can see your entire voting history. You can see all of your information regarding where you live, what your partisan affiliation is. And we have that at beballotready.vote, beballotready.vote. And one of the things that's wonderful is that when you send back your ballot, so first it has a unique barcode that's tied to you as a voter. So we can track that just like Amazon, just like USPS. So we know when it's going out. We mail out ballots 27 days before election day. This year, that means October 12th for the November 8th general election. So we know when it's going out to you. And then when you mail it back and you put it in that green envelope, it has a barcode on it. So we know when we scan it in and we know when we've received it. And we'll send you a text message update if you sign up for those, or you can go along and check out your dashboard. And then we send you an update when we've signature verified it. And then we send you an update when we've sent it ahead to tabulation. And this is the type of thing that we're trying to advance further and further, such that people can have confidence in the process. Again, this isn't rocket science in terms of why we decided to do this. It's just for the same reason that you can have confidence in, is my Amazon package coming to me, and it makes me feel better that I can track it all through the process. It also helps such that we know if anything goes awry. We can alert you, or you can alert us if, hey, it says my ballot's been mailed out, but it hasn't gotten to me. Well, then we would deactivate that ballot packet. We would send you a new one and we would track that one. Or if you mailed back a ballot packet, but then you thought you were clever and you decided, well, I'm going to show up to the voting location and I'm going to try and vote in person. Well, when you went to check in, we would have already scanned in your return ballot and it says you've already voted, so you would have to vote a provisional ballot. And so it gives us a lot of insight into your individual vote, and it allows you to track the process. And I know that everyone at Maricopa County Community College System is smart and wouldn't ever try to cheat the system. But we have methods built in to protect against that anyways.
Great, thank you for that. In terms of some of the other functions of your office, you mentioned the recording of documents, and that was an astronomical number every year that you have to record and keep. But that's the question that came in: how long do you keep records? Are records kept in perpetuity? And that just seems like it would be
forever.
Okay.
We're the historic preservation. So we keep some in physical format, some of our earliest records, but then we have digitized everything. So everything going back to when we became a county in the 1870s, you can go online and you can see partial recordings from when Maricopa County was first established, prior to Arizona even being a state. We are the guardians of the historical record, and it continues to swell and swell and swell. And so you can track, your property through the course of history. We're also looking at adding additional protections to protect against things like title fraud, such that you can get alerts whenever anything is, recorded relating to a certain piece of property or something like that. So we're looking to innovate in that area as well. Like I said, most of the recordings do relate to the real estate industry, which is why when we saw mortgage rates go down really, really low, we saw lots and lots of people refinancing, and that required a new recording. Everyone wants to move to Arizona. Everyone wants to move to Maricopa County. We're the fastest growing county in the United States for like 4 out of the last 6 years or something crazy like that. Everyone knows that everyone was trying to buy a home a little bit ago, and there weren't enough homes, which is why all those prices went up. But so we were seeing that reflected in our number of recordings, and it was go up. But other things are things such as liens that you would want recorded in the public records, such that you would say, I have a right to the proceeds of this judgment, and here it is in the public record, filed before anyone else put a lien on that judgment, and so I've staked my claim.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. I can just imagine the number of records that are being held in perpetuity. My goodness. We have a comment in the chat about Be Ballot Ready. So County Recorder, you'll be happy to note that Joe, thank you for joining us today, calls your Be Ballot Ready system awesomeness in action, because he was able to send it in and got an immediate message that said when the ballot was received. So thanks, Joe, for giving that a good plug.
Amazing.
In terms of go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, amazing. Joe does not work for the office, so it's not like he has to do that. But thank you, Joe.
I will verify. Joe is a great citizen and supporter of Maricopa. For first-time voters, some of our students, this may be their first experience voting. So what should a first-time voter know? Like, say, I've never voted before and I show up at the polls the day of an election. What might I experience, and what are some tips for getting through the system smoothly?
Yeah, so first you have to be registered in order to vote. And to participate in an election, you have to be registered 29 days before the election. And so that this year, that's November 10th. However, November 10th falls on a holiday. I think that's Columbus Day. And so that's actually November 11th this year, or excuse me, October 10th and October 11th. So you must be registered to vote. When you go to register to vote, you fill out forms. A lot of people do this through servicearizona.com, or they do it when they get their driver's license at the motor vehicle division. When we get that information, we check to make sure that you're a real person. We go to the Social Security Administration. We go to the Office of Vital Statistics. Then we send you a voter registration card to the address that you gave us on file to make sure that you do, in fact, live at that location. If you registered to vote, you can either choose to be on the active early voting list or not. If you choose to be on the active early voting list, you will be mailed a early ballot 27 days before the election for every election for which you are eligible. Now, regardless of whether you choose to be on the active early voting list or not, you can vote in person. So even if you're mailed a ballot, if you choose not to return it and would prefer to vote in person, that's fine. If you aren't on the active early voting list, of course, come vote in person. You can go to locations.maricopa.vote, and you'll see that voting locations begin opening 27 days before the election period. Again, that's October 12th, and then they escalate up. So while we'll start with 10 voting locations, eventually we'll get up to 230 for Tuesday, Election Day, November 8th. Now, the neat thing about Maricopa County now is that these are vote anywhere voting locations, meaning no matter where you live in the valley or no matter where you work in the valley, you can go to one that's close to you, wherever you are at the time. You can check the waiting lines of the different locations, and you can go in, and even if that's not near where you live, you can vote at that location, because what it will do is, through a secure real-time connection to the voter registration database, it knows where you live, and so you'll be able to pull up that information. It'll print on demand the ballot that you should have, and then you'll be able to vote that ballot. Now, if you're voting on election day, you can feed that directly into the mini tabulator at the voting location. If you're doing that before election day, that's governed by early voting, and so you're going to put that in an envelope, you're going to seal that envelope, you're going to sign that envelope, and then it's going to go back to us and back to the central facility.
So if you're a first-time voter, I think you're hearing many, many ways in which you can be active, be an engaged voter, whether it's sitting at home and you've received it in the mail, or returning it by mail, dropping it off, or showing up. Really personal preference, but I think the key thing to remember is that there's lots of ways to be engaged as a voter. In terms of the day of, so you mentioned open at 6 a.m., close at 7 p.m., the actual poll. So if you're going to go the day of the actual vote, if you're in line by 7 p.m., you still can cast a vote. Is that correct?
That's right. So in the August primary, just a few months ago, the average voter waited in line fewer than 2 minutes. For most of the day, we kept lines under 10 minutes at every single voting location. Only at the very end of the day, perhaps because this is human nature, a few locations in the West Valley, and Anthem and Surprise in particular, the lines built up a little bit. I think we got up to 30 minutes at some of them. But as long as you are in line, even if you're outside, as long as you're in line by 7 p.m., then you are good to go. Now, that might mean that you don't vote right at 7 p.m., but as long as you're in line, then you're good to go.
Excellent. We had a question come in about voter rolls, how they kept up to date. Someone canvassed a house that looked empty, but there were 6 people registered there. So tell us a little bit about how things are updated and how you manage such a large system.
Yeah. So we strictly comply with the National Voter Registration Act and with state statute, which limits our ability to automatically delist somebody. And you can see why that is because both state law and federal law doesn't want us taking people off voter registration lists simply based off of inaccurate or imperfect or incomplete information. But one of the main ways that we do this is we're always sending out mail. So if we're sending you out a ballot, great. If we're sending you out a new voter registration card, great. Prior to every election, if you're a mail voter, we send you out a 90-day notice card. Great. When that mail comes back as undeliverable, then we start the inactivation process. We would say we've now received one undeliverable piece of mail. We'd send you another one. If we receive that back, we start to move you to the inactive process. Now, that doesn't mean that you're taken off the voter registration database. That simply means you're moved to inactive and you're no longer mailed a ballot to that particular voting location. If you move and you register to a new state, we are part of something called ERIC, which is a interstate consortium of 33 states that all push up their voter registration databases and match. And so after every election, we'll send matches such that we see that this person is registered in your state and is registered in our state. Let's find out where this person is. Now, it is not a crime to be registered in multiple states. It is a crime to vote in multiple jurisdictions. So please don't do it. Even if you're not prevented at the time, it will be sent to the Attorney General afterwards, and it is a felony. Some of the other things that we do are, of course, we take input from you. So, if you're moving, we encourage you to think of your voter registration information as one of the things that you would take into consideration if you move. We know that Arizona is a highly transient state, and we know that sometimes that's not the first thing that you would think about, but it is something that you want to keep in mind. National change of address forms with the USPS, we partner with them, and then we get lists of people who are moving. One thing that pretty consistently is a challenge for us is students who have gone away to college and maybe never notified the county recorder's department. So what we have done is on the ballot packets, we send out a yellow ballot packet, and at the top of that, it'll have the voter's information, but it will also have a please check this box if the voter is no longer residing here. I mentioned that we can begin the inactivation process if we get undeliverable mail. Well, what if it's not undeliverable, but the person's not there? Then by you checking that box, sending it back, then we can begin that inactivation process. Now, all this is important, but even if it's not perfect, remember, for every single voter, we still have to confirm identity. Meaning, if you should vote and look in person, you have to scan your ID and you have to show your ID to a poll worker. If you vote by mail, you have to use that right piece of the correct green envelope. You have to use the correct ballot. That envelope has an ID, that barcode that scans to your personal profile, and you have to sign it. And we check your signature against all historic signatures that we have on your file. And if it doesn't match, then we can't send your ballot through to tabulation. That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, it was a comprehensive answer. I appreciate that. So many checks and balances. So thank you for providing that clarity. In terms of the number of different ballots and ballot styles. So we had an earlier guest referring to how large Maricopa County is, and depending on where you live, your ballot can look very different than someone else's ballot based on local races, towns, school bonds, and overrides. So how many different types of variations do you all have to manage?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you knowing that, just because I think a lot of people just think of the high level contests and assume that a ballot is a ballot is a ballot. Well, in the November 2020 election, which was the last statewide general election, really the only race that everyone would have had the same in Arizona would have been U.S. Senator and President. For all other races, it depends on where you live. And then in the primary, it depends on which party you're in. And then we have different language ballots too. So for the August primary in 2022, we had over 19,000 different ballot styles. So if you think of all the intersecting jurisdictional lines, the water districts, even your cities, your towns, your justice of the peace districts, your constable districts, your county districts, your state legislative districts, your congressional districts, your school board districts. And so we here in Arizona, we like to vote on stuff. And you'll notice that your November general election ballot will, maybe you're just thinking about, gosh, I'm really excited about this U.S. Senate race, or I'm really excited about Attorney General race. But you're going to have 70 plus contests on that ballot. And you're going to be you're going to be voting on whether or not you even want to retain judges. And so it's a very full ballot. And it's why we celebrate programs like this, because it's a lot of stuff that if you don't prepare and anticipate for, you might not have all that much information about, because Arizona is a state that likes to put a lot of responsibility, but also burden into the hands of the citizens to be informed about the, like I said, 70 plus contests that could be on your ballot.
Really like that you use the word prepare. We have been encouraging people all week long, make sure you prepare and have a plan to go vote, because there's so many important races. And we had one of our guests talk about down ballot, and to the county recorder's point, a lot of people focus on the big races, the statewide or federal races, and yet your local town has a huge impact on your local community and your quality of life. So make sure that you're very thorough, that you go through the entire ballot. There's lots of important races on there and questions that you will be asked to consider. One of our guests suggested start at the bottom and work your way back up to make sure that you cover everything that's on there. So another question that came in, where are the signatures for confirmation? Where do those come from when you compare signatures? What was the originating source?
So the original, great question, because we do match every single ballot that comes back, early ballot. It's reviewed by humans and it has to be matched by humans to previous signatures. So which signatures do we use for that? Well, the first one that we get is when you register to vote. But then we also get all subsequent interactions with our office. So anytime you send back a ballot, we then capture an image of that signature. We add it into our file. As soon as we confirm that it's a good signature, then it's another one that we have on historic record for you. Anytime that you send in a voter registration update, you want to send us a letter saying, I'm going to sign here and say, take me off the early voting list, put me on the early voting list, change my party to this, change my party to that, I've moved to this address, we're going to have that signature as well. So if you participate by mail in elections, and if you stay here in Maricopa County for some time, we're going to build up quite the repository of signatures on you. And that's nice, because while we do all have distinguishing broad strokes, sometimes the signatures change a little bit, and that gives us more, such that it's less likely that we would have to reach out to you and confirm that it was in fact you by phone, by email, by text messages.
Good reminder. Thanks for explaining that as well. Another question, what happens with the ballots, chain of custody, when you vote early compared to voting on election day? What happens with those envelopes? Say I filled mine out at home and I didn't have a chance to mail it in, and instead I'm dropping it off. What happens with those? When are those counted? We've had a couple of questions.
Chain of custody is incredibly important, and it's something that we document ad infinitum, ad nauseum, but it's really important. And so, and it's what allows us for that early ballot to give you the peace of mind knowing that it has gone through all those steps. But so let's take, for instance, that you get an early ballot, you get it by mail, and then you say, you know what, I sort of want to know what's going on at these voting locations. So I'm just going to take my early ballot. It's in that green envelope. I've sealed it and I've signed it, and I'm going to drop it off at a voting location because I think that will be fun. Well, you're going to go there, you're going to put it in a secure bin. That secure bin is going to be sealed by 2 keys that bipartisan team members must have. When they go to remove it, both of those keys are going to be put in, they're going to be opened up. The ballots are going to be taken out, they're going to be counted, they're going to be put in a box that is then going to have seals on it, and they're going to have numbered seals on the bin. The 2 people who are doing this are going to write down the number of ballots, they're going to write down the numbers on the seals, and then they're going to move it to the transportation bin, to the transportation truck. The truck's going to take it, and it's going to eventually end up at our central count facility. When it is received, we're then going to, a new team is going to take it, and they're going to say, okay, are those seals, have they been broken? Okay, no. Are they the same numbers that were sealed there that were used to seal the bin to begin with? No. Okay, we're going to now break them. We're going to take them out. We're going to count the ballots. Are the ballots the same that were said to left that site that arrived at this site? And so on and so forth through all stages of the process, such that we trust each other. We have great people working here. And more importantly, we have people working in groups of two that are bipartisan. But even though we trust each other, we take nothing for granted. So if it leaves my possession as a batch of 200 ballots, then the next person, no matter how trustful that person thinks I am, they're going to make sure it's 200 ballots, because guess what? When they give it to the next room, that person's going to make sure. And so we're always going to be checking and reconciling and making sure that the chain of custody is preserved through all stages of the process. The only place where your ballot becomes secret and it just becomes part of the numbers is when it is separated from the envelope. Then it becomes secret. Then it's just one ballot in a batch of ballots, and then we're counting the number of ballots rather than counting your ballot. And that's because in the United States, it's a sacrosanct principle that we cannot tie your votes back to you. We can tie whether or not you voted. So if you go onto that customized personal dashboard that we have, you can see all the races that you've voted in, whether it was 2018 primary, a 2016 jurisdictional election, but we don't tell you who you voted for.
I appreciate that clarification. Sometimes I do receive questions from students whether that information is tracked, and it really is quite a powerful principle that it's not how you voted, it's whether or not you voted. So thanks for reinforcing that. So as we start winding down our time today, again, many thanks, County Recorder Richard, for joining us and providing such great information. What would be the biggest tip for our listeners, for those tuning in, about getting ready for Election Day? You could give one final golden nugget of advice.
Yeah. So you can go online pretty soon here to that dashboard, and you can pull up your sample ballot. So you'll see everything that will be on your ballot. Now, we won't mail you your ballot until, if you're on the active early voting list, until, as I mentioned, October 12th. But you can start looking at all of those races and familiarizing yourself and starting that and say, oh gosh, I didn't think that I would have to vote for Justice of the Peace or something like that. So that would be a good place to start. And that also has lots of informational videos if you want to learn anything else. And it's, again, where you could track your ballot. And I would just encourage you to track your ballot, because I think that gives you a peace of mind, and you can tell your friends about that as well, such that hopefully you can have confidence in this process. And then the last thing I would say is, you know me now. I'm accessible. Our team's accessible. We love this process. We want to answer questions. We would much rather we answer your questions rather than the Twitterverse or something like that answers your questions. And are there some right answers on Twitter? Yeah, but there's also some wrong answers. And so we'd love to have that. So if, please reach out to us, and please encourage your friends to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate, again, you joining us to cap off our Constitution Week activities, talk about Constitution Day. And thanks as well for being such a great public servant and all the hard work that you and your team do to make sure that our voting is safe and secure here in Maricopa County.
Thank you very much to one of the largest community college systems in the United States. I'm proud of you guys, and I hope you're learning stuff that's interesting. I hope you're learning stuff that's fun, and I hope to join you in class, because I really believe that learning is a lifelong mission, and it makes me so happy. And so if I don't learn something today, then I'll be disappointed, but I'll be relying on you guys to have me covered for the day.
Thank you so much. Thanks as well to all of you for joining in. Students, staff, community members, appreciate you celebrating with us on Constitution Day. our Constitution Week activities. Students, you'll find a couple of links in the chat. Chandler Gilbert, if you're here from Chandler Gilbert, there's a form to fill out. For other students, you can email us and we can verify your attendance if needed. So thanks again for joining us. We'll go ahead and tune out now. Lots of resources and links that we've put in the chat, so please make great use of those. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.